Hey everyone, how's it going? And welcome back to this brand new hands-on with Maxon intro to rigging workshop. My name's Ellie and I'm a trainer at Maxon, and I'm so pleased to be joined by New York animator and motion designer and Cinema 4D expert, Joe Herman. How's it going, Joe?
Hi everybody. I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you. I hope everybody's doing well, and thank you to everybody for coming.
Yes, thank you for already. We've got a whole bunch of people on here and a bunch of people saying hi in the chat. So Bernd, Hannah, Jay, Junior, Glenn, Benedict, there are so many of you. Adam, Sharon, Christian, so many to name. So yeah, thank you so much for being part of this workshop, and yeah, we're really excited to get into it.
Yeah, definitely. It's an important subject.
It is a very important subject, which clearly everyone is really keen to get into.
Yep.
So for everyone who is joining, here is an overview of the topic. So Joe has created all the content for this, all the project files, and he has created this course outline and basically broken down this rigging workshop into 6 different parts, which you can see on here. So we have part 1 today, which is going to be rigging fundamentals, and then over the next 6 weeks we're going to be diving into some really amazing stuff. So before we get into what we're going to be doing and, you know, taking a look at the kind of things we're going to be going through today with Joe, here are some extra things in case anyone is new to one of these workshops or any of our sessions. All of these sessions are recorded along with all of the other shows that we do, and they get uploaded onto the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel. And we've also got a whole bunch of project files. So Joe's been working behind the scenes, creating some great project files for this. And I've got a Dropbox link for that. And that should be found in the handout section, along with all of the other links that you could possibly need. And he's created oh yeah, you go.
Uploading the files before each session. So right now, the files that are there are for session 1. And next week, we'll be putting in the files for session 2.
Yeah, that's great. And you've done a starting file and a kind of final file as well. Is that right? So people can follow along and they can break it down. That's great. That's cool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, for anyone who can't see those links, or if you can't see the handout section, then just let me know in the questions like you guys do, and I can link you to all of that stuff. And if you want to follow Joe on his socials, Twitter and Instagram, it's at Joe Herman Artist. So
that's right.
Fundamentals of rigging. So Joe, do you want to sort of break down what we're going to be going through today?
Yeah, absolutely. So this course sort of assumes that, you know, you're either new to rigging, or you have either no knowledge of it or next to no knowledge of it. But I'm sure that if you're in this class, you sort of know what it's about. So we're going to start, you know, with what is rigging, and you know, I might as well give my little speech now, or which is basically that, you know, 3D animation and production is a huge field. Obviously, it has modeling, it has texturing, and lighting, and of course animation. And so you know, we'll basically so we're going to talk about what rigging is, and then we're going to go into, you know, the core of rigging, which is joints and bones. Then we're going to build a forward kinematic rig to rig a lamp, a mechanical object, and then we're going to see how we can introduce inverse kinematics into that rig to make the animation process easier. We're going to talk about the difference between that inverse and forward kinematics approach to animation. And but we're going to rig today using parent-based rigging, which is actually really useful for mechanical rigging and robots and machines and things like that. That's why we're doing a lamp. But next week, we're actually going to begin our discussion of point weighting, which is where you really have to, that's really how you rig organic objects, and things that, meshes that deform along with the joints. So basically, but you don't always have to use point weighting. You could use this parent-based weighting if it's a mechanical rigging class. Application. So, and the project file is there. It's in the thing if you want to. I mean, I have sort of mixed feelings. I think you can follow along with me as I do it, or you can watch and follow along later. It's up to you. If you get too bogged down in trying to keep up, I just say watch it and try it on your own later, but you can certainly try at the same time. There's a starting file and there's an ending file with the rig finished in it. And that's sort of what we're going to be doing today. Ellie?
Cool. Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds really cool. Yeah, so there's a few people that are saying they can't access the link. So what I'll do, as soon as Joe gets started, I will ping those links to you guys in the chat. So you should have access to those ready. Right. And don't forget, there is a question section. So for anyone who is maybe new, there is a question section where you can ask all your questions related to this workshop or like anything really. And I'm going to be kind of here letting Joe do his thing, and I'm going to be monitoring the questions, asking some of those questions as we go, as well as answering a couple in the chat. So we're going to keep this nice and, you know, as interactive as we possibly can. Does that work well for you, Joe? If I sort of interrupt you at different points for a few questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Just let me know.
Cool. That sounds great.
Yeah, we'll do it. Exactly.
Perfect. So are you happy for me to pass the screen over to you and we can get into it?
Yes, let's go. Let's
go. Let's go. Right, let me just find you here. There you go.
Okay.
The presenter.
Okay, let's see here. Okay, so can everybody see my screen okay?
Cool, yeah.
And my audio is okay? Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get started. As I said before, you know, you can animate things in Cinema 4D. For example, you can animate the position of objects and the rotation of objects, or if you're doing MoGraph animation where you're animating a zillion clones of things, or particle animation, you can do all sorts of kind of animation without rigging. But eventually, if you want to rig certain things like mechanical things, like the locomotive, the wheels of a locomotive, or things like that, or robotic things, or motor, you know, gears and stuff, and of course characters. Actually, everybody, you know, associates rigging with character work, and that's certainly what it's, you know, that's certainly very important. If you have to bend the limbs of characters, you know, that's where rigging, you know, comes in very handy as well. But it's not just for characters, it's for all kinds of things. So like I said, this course, you know, assumes you know next to nothing about it. So let's start at the beginning, okay? So basically what we're going to do is we are going to start with a new file here, and I'm going to go into a front view, and a lot of the rigging tools happen to be found here in this character menu. So for the sake of convenience, I'm just going to rip it off and put it right here, just to have easy access to it. So the basis of all rigging has to do with the joint, okay? So what we're going to do is there's a tool here, it's called your joint tool. And if I click on that, I have got my joint tool selected. And if to make a joint, I can try to just click. But if I try to just click, nothing happens. No joints are made. And that's because the joint tool, when you click on it, is sort of in an editing mode. So in order to put it in its creation mode, you have to hold down the control key, and then you can click, and congratulations, you've just made your first joint. Now, if you look in the object manager, it's kind of interesting because there's our joint, but it actually also created a little null, and it put sort of, and they called it root. It's just like a regular null that you might create, but it made a null automatically, called it root, and it put the joint inside of that root. So you can see here that here's the joint over here, and then the null is over there. And the null is in exact same place as the joint. So there's reasons why you would want to have nulls in your joint rigs. And we're going to look at some because we're going to use nulls actually in our course of our investigations here and building rigs. But I actually prefer to just make my own nulls and add them to the rig. So if you click on the joint tool, you could just uncheck this little root null thing here. And now if I control click and I make a joint, it just makes the joint and it doesn't make a null. Okay, so now there's our first joint. Now the thing is that I'm going to control click, okay, and I'm going to make a second joint. And there it is. Now you can see here that it has starting to create a hierarchy of joints. So this joint 1, which is the second joint we created, is now a child of the first joint we created. And the thing is that, and there's a hierarchy being made. Now you'll also notice that something else happened when I created the second joint, and that was this shape got drawn between the two joints. And this shape, this is called a bone. Okay, I'm going to switch to a perspective view. You can sort of see that that's what the bone looks like. Okay, so in reality, let me go back to the front view. In reality, you don't really create bones. The bones get made automatically between the joints. Okay, so really you're creating joints and the bones get drawn automatically. Now, the thing, so for the nomenclature on this, we've got joints and bones. Now, you'll notice on the bone, it has like a thicker section and a thinner section. And that's actually useful because the thicker section is sort of telling you that this is the parent of this joint. This joint is the parent of this joint. In other words, this joint is deeper into the hierarchy than this joint, which is more root level. Okay, so the thing is that since this is a hierarchy, if I were to click on the first joint and choose the rotation tool, obviously the second joint and the whole bone rotates along with that. So if I were to take this joint out of the hierarchy, then no bone is being drawn because there is no hierarchy anymore. And if I were to click on this joint here and move it, the second joint doesn't move with it, obviously, because it's not in the hierarchy. Now, if I were to make this joint a child of this joint here, now you could see that the bone is reversed, and it's now showing us that the thicker part of this joint is here, and then it's going to the thinner part over here. So these are important symbols. You can actually, if you want, let's go ahead and put it back the way it was, and you can see that that's how you make joints and bones. Okay. So now what I want to do, there's something else actually you can keep an eye out for, but we're not going to talk about it right now. But every joint has an axis, okay, and you can see that axis there. Now, the proper way of that axis is that the Z, there's a Y, there's an X, and a Z. Generally, and like I said, I don't want to get too bogged down into joint axes, but because we're not really going to be using them that much, and they're not that important for this class. But the Z direction usually runs along the length of the bone. Okay, so that's sometimes, for example, what you can do is I'm going to choose the rotation tool. Usually, if I rotate a joint, okay, the whole hierarchy rotates. But if I hold down the 7 key, and if I move Like let's say I screwed up the axis of the joint, okay? So that's why in this align tool, if I click that, it realigns the joint to the, realigns the axis to the joint so that the Z is now running along the joint in the proper way. So like I said, I don't really want to talk about that, but just keep in mind that joints have axes to them. So we're going to go back to this front view. We've got our first joint and our second joint. And now I want to create, actually the kind of rig I want to create is kind of like if I'm rigging maybe some kind of a control, and I want to, so I want to continue this joint chain. So what I'm going to do is, let's say if nothing is selected, and if I take the joint tool, and now if I click over here, I'm starting a new joint chain that's not continuing along with this chain, okay? Because it's not, as you can see, it's not in the hierarchy anymore. So to continue it, you could do a few things. You could do a couple of things. Number one, you could just take that joint you just made, and you could just drag it as a child of the second joint you made, and then it automatically draws the bone between them, okay? And then you can, you could do that, but you'll notice that this joint was not incremented in the right way. This had joint 1 instead of joint 2, but that's not a big deal. You're going to name your joints anyway later. You're not going to call everything joint. That would be confusing. You're going to call it like wrist or forearm or whatever. So the other way to do it though is you just click on the last joint you made, take the joint tool, and then continue drawing your joint chain. Now, I want to branch this over here because I want to create a branching structure, because so obviously I'm not just going to control click over here because that's going to continue it that way. So I'm going to go back to the point where I wanted to start branching from, which is right here, okay? And I'm going to control click here and here, and then you can see that we've got the correct branching of the joints happening in that way. And I want to go back to that joint right here and click here, okay? And now we've got, this is the shape I was looking for. This is the kind of rig. I don't know, maybe you can think of it as, I know it's slanted, but like the yoke of a star, of a starship or something like that, whatever you want to think of it as. Now, but you can see how the hierarchy of this joint chain is very important. And this is the type of thing, because most rigs that you built have a specific hierarchy. In the case of a humanoid character, there's a certain way that you build it. Like for example, the shoulder is like usually a child of the chest bone, and then the elbow, the elbow joint over here is a child of the shoulder, the wrist of a child of the elbow, like the old song goes. I don't know, this is connected to that. However, the knee is not a child of the elbow, because if you move the elbow, the knee doesn't move with it. So there are different hierarchies and branching structures and rigs that you either have to figure out as you go along, or figure it out so that way the thing moves correctly. So in this case, for example, the one at the top of the hierarchy is this joint right here. So if I were to rotate that, obviously the whole hierarchy rotates. And then if I were to select this joint here, then all the joints in that hierarchy rotates, and so on and so forth along with it. So hierarchies, that's something that is very important. Now, when you're, actually, I'm going to delete this for now. Sometimes when you're creating joints, if you're dealing with a symmetrical character, you might want to take the joint tool and under symmetry, under its options, under symmetry here, we might want to turn a symmetry on. So let's say, for example, I'm drawing some frog's legs here. Okay, so if I start drawing some frog's legs here, you know, and you have a symmetrical character, obviously, you will see that you can draw things in symmetry, which could be useful. Another thing you could do, and is that if you want that symmetry to happen, let's say, for example, I'll just draw a little box just so we see where it is, like a little thing. And if I move that over to, let's say, here, right, and I take the joint tool, and instead of doing it on the, you know, on the before, I was doing it on the mirror of the symmetry was on the Z, this is the Z axis, and this is the Y axis. It was on the ZY plane. So you can imagine a mirror on that ZY plane. But instead of that, I can now, for example, tell this thing that I want the origin of the symmetry to be this object, and I can drag that object in there. And now, you know, you can have the symmetry wherever this object is, okay? Or if you want, you can change it to a different kind of symmetry based on where it is. So if you're doing a part of your character and you want the symmetry to happen somewhere else, you can do this effect. So that is the basics about joints and bones. You create your joints, use the joint tool. And by the way, when you use the joint tool, if you're, let's say you create like sort of a joint chain, when you get rid of the control key, when you take your finger off the control key, then the joint tool turns into kind of like a editing. You can edit the joints with it. Okay, and then once you're ready to continue the chain, you can then control click and continue the chain. So that's important. Okay, so hopefully there are no questions about that so far. I don't think there really would be. But
there
now
are a couple of questions that come in sort of just at the start of this. I was sort of, I'm waiting for like a good time to sort of interrupt you, because that was some really great stuff that we're going through already.
Okay.
So Bill was wondering, how are you creating a joint without the root folder?
Oh, yes. That's fine. I did mention that, but I'm happy to mention it there again. So,
Thanks.
Because it's important, actually. So like I said before, some people like to have a root null to start their joint chains, okay? And like I said before, nulls are actually important when you're developing a rig, okay? You can use them for different things. We're actually going to use them for different things. Like I said, I happen to like to make my own nulls. Sometimes I use it automatically, sometimes I don't. But anyway, the way that you take it off is that you click on the joint tool, and then you go to the attributes of that tool, because obviously if you don't have anything selected, it's, you know, as soon as you click on this, you'll get the attributes of that tool, and you uncheck root null. And now if you create your joints, there's no root null at the top level.
Perfect, that's great. I think that also may have answered a second question, which was handy. Scott was wondering, are there hotkeys to pick, walk up and down joint chains?
There probably are. I mean, you could, for example, just, you know, just use the up and down arrow, and you can, you know, pick it through that. So you just click on the first joint, and then just use the up and down arrow and move to the different joints.
Yeah. Cool. One final quick one from Charles. How do you join the symmetry hierarchies?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, like, for example, in the case of the symmetry, for example, you know, we'll make like, so if you make a symmetry, let's say this one right here, okay? So what's happened is it made two hierarchies, right? This one and this one, right? So usually you don't join them to each other because usually what you do is like take symmetry off, right? In the case of legs, this is kind of loosely based on a leg type of a thing. But so we're going to take the symmetry off. And usually what happens is that, you know, you have either a spine or a pelvis joint. Okay, so let's say, oops, let's say we create like a, you know, a spine joint, right? So usually what you do is you take these joints, but we're going to get actually more into this later, but you would take that and then put that into this joint, which is the spine here. And then this joint now controls those other joints. So that's how you could, you know, in this case, I mean, this happens to be legs, but there's, you know, there's other ways too, but you can do that. Okay.
Cool.
So
yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Unless there's anything else.
No, we're good to go.
Okay.
Thanks.
Those were good questions. Yeah, just let me know anytime you have any questions. I'll be happy to answer them.
Cool, will do.
Okay. So anyway, so we've got this thing, right? So we've got this thing, it's a lamp. So this is a mechanical object, and we're going to rig it. We're actually going to rig it without point weighting because we're going to talk about point weighting in the second class. And what is this made out of? Let's take a look actually. So it's made out of a cylinder here, okay, which I've named base. And this is a parametric object. So you can see that all of its parameters, like radius and height and all that, segments, they're all still there. The arm 1 was a cube, and it's sort of stretched out. You know, you've got the ball, which is just a sphere. You've got the arm 2, which is just a cube. And then you've got the lamp. Now the lamp is not a parametric object, as you can see by the little icon here. It is a editable object. Okay, so it's just this thing is made out of some mostly parametric objects and one editable object. Now, since today we're going to look at this parenting-based rigging technique, we can leave these things as parametric objects. We don't have that's fine. However, if we are going to be doing character or organic shape or, you know, whatever, a worm or anything that like, you know, deforms, then you can't use parametric objects because editable objects allows you access to the points of the mesh, whereas parametric objects don't. And the whole thing about point weighting is that you need to be able to weight these points to different bones to apply different bone influences on different points. So you can't use parametric objects, but we're going to actually not do that today. So so we're free to just leave these as parametric objects. So I'm going to go to a side view. Hopefully everybody can see that okay. And I'm going to start constructing the rig for this lamp. So once again, I'm going to go to the joint tool. I'm going to uncheck root null, which is already unchecked, right? And I'm going to control click right where I want this first joint to go. You could think of it where you want this lower arm where you want it to rotate from. So it's going to rotate right from about right here. Okay, and I'm going to click it. I've created my first joint. Oops, now look at this actually. I didn't want this to happen, but since it happened, this unexpected thing that happened, then we can fix that. So actually, this actually made this, since I had my lamp object selected, whenever you create a joint, it makes it a child of what's selected. Okay, so I don't want that obviously, so I'm going to select everything, and now start again by creating a little joint over here, okay? And you can see that there's my first joint, okay? So now I'm going to go about right here at the center of this ball, and I'm going to click right there, okay? And it added it to the hierarchy. Now I'm going to go sort of like, hold down the control key and click at the end of this thing. Now, by the way, my mouse is still held down, because while it's still held down, I could move this around, okay? So if you don't, like sort of where it's at, you can sort of fix it. So I'll do it like that. Coming around, I'm gonna make one more joint, and it's gonna be out here somewhere. Actually, this joint, I'm not gonna get into a long discussion about this now, but this joint is more aesthetic because really you don't have to make this last joint. But for aesthetic reasons, we are gonna make that joint. So there's our little hierarchy there, okay? So now what we're going to do is we are going to name these joints. We're gonna start at the bottom. And since this, and we're just gonna call this arm lower, let's say, okay? We're gonna select this joint. Now, it's common that since it exists at the little intersection of these two bones, it's common to want to try to, you could call it like elbow or knee or something like that. But really this joint here is going to select everything on this arm. If you want, you could even add little things onto this arm and parent it to that as well. So I'm just going to call it arm upper. But if you want, you can call it elbow. You won't get arrested or anything. And then we're going to go to this next joint, which is this joint. And this joint is going to control this head of the lamp. Okay, so we're going to call this lamp. And then this, like I said, this joint here, as I said, it's kind of like there only for aesthetic purposes. We're going to call it lamp tip. Okay, so now we've named the joints. It's very important to name your joints, because when you're building a rig, especially for a complex character, things get long, okay? You can have a lot of joints, a lot of constraints, a lot of nulls, a lot of whatever, this stuff. So, you really want to keep things organized so you know what's going on. Anyway, so I'm going to go back to the perspective view, and you can see that there's our bones. Now, the thing is that these bones are actually kind of big. I mean, I could leave them like that, but it would get in the way of looking at this stuff. Although it looks kind of cool, though. It kind of looks like a Tiffany lamp or something from the, 1800s or something, or Art Deco. But in any case, we don't really want to have these big hulking bones like that. So we're going to select all these bones. And in their attributes, under where it says the display, bone display, the size is being controlled by the length. So the longer the bone is, the bigger this, the more distance there is between the two joints, the bigger the bone gets between them. So we're going to give it a custom length, which is about 5. That's fine. If you want, you could lower it. You could still see that they're still kind of big, but that's fine. But you could still see that you still see the size of them, like it's wider on the bottom and smaller on the top, but they're just smaller. Now, actually, you can display them also as lines. A lot of people like doing this. You don't have to display them as bones, okay? Like you can display them as lines. And I do this sometimes. I kind of like that certain times, but just keep in mind that benefit of using this, where you actually see the direction the hierarchy is moving, is not there if you choose lines. Okay, but it is nice and clean. Okay, in any case, so now we have this thing, and if we choose this bottom joint here and we choose the rotation tool and we move it, we can see that the whole hierarchy is moving, but nothing's moving with it. Okay, so what we're going to do is this process of we're going to parent, we're going to make these bones the parent of the objects that we wanted to move. So for example, we're going to take the arm 1 and we're going to parent it to the arm lower joint. So it's sitting right there, you can see that. And as I said, once we get into point weighting or organic characters, then we want to talk about point weighting. But here with this parenting way, it's extremely useful, especially for mechanical objects and mechanical rigs. So now we've parented it, and now if I were to rotate that joint, obviously this thing moves along with it, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the ball, I'm also going to parent it to that lower joint, okay? I mean, that lower, yeah, that arm lower joint, and now that moves with it too, okay? If I were to take the arm 2 object, which is this object here, and we're to parent it on that as well, then what happens is that that also will move with it. But however, if I were to click on the arm upper joint and move that, it doesn't move with that. So that's not very helpful. So what we want to do now is take the arm 2 geometry and parent it to the arm upper. That's where it should go. So this way, this moves now, and then this moves now. Okay, so now that's parented nicely. Now, the thing is that what I want to do now is take the lamp and parent it to the lamp joint. Okay, and so now this is now parented to that lamp joint. We can move that, we can have it, you know, face us if we want, we can control it with that joint here. So what we've just done actually is we've started creating what's known as a forward kinematic rig. Why forward kinematic? What usually means that, like, for example, if you want to animate something, like let's say you want to animate your arm. So forward kinematic means that first you animate the shoulder. Hey, Ellie, do people see my screen? I'm not sure, actually.
So we can only see the Cinema 4D screen.
Okay, I'll just explain it. It doesn't, you don't have to see my screen anyway, but so you could, you know, forward kinematic means that you animate the shoulder, then you animate the elbow, then you animate the wrist, and then the fingers, and in that way. And that you need to sometimes do forward. I mean, a lot of times forward kinematics animation is the kind of thing you need to do depending on what the situation is. So this is a forward kinematic rig, which means that, like, let's say, for example, I were to take this lower joint and I'm going to set a key for it right now, okay? And I'll go, like, let's say 10 frames later, and I'll animate this up a little bit, set a key for it there. Okay, and I'll go back to 5 frames, so we'll get a little overlapping animation. And I'll set a key for the arm upper, okay, and we'll go to like 15 frames, and we'll animate that a little bit up like that, and set a keyframe for it there. And then for the lamp, okay, we'll go back to 10 frames, and then we'll kind of like set a keyframe for it there. We'll go to like 20 frames and have it sort of like look up and then look at us. Okay, and so now what we've just did is we've created some animation for this forward kinematic rig. Okay. However, so that's what forward kinematics is. It means that you start at the bottom and you go, you know, up the rig as you want. You animate every joint as you need, and that's a very important and viable way to do it. forward kinematics. Remember that term. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to, we're going to talk in a little bit about another technique which is called inverse kinematics. But before we do, I want to add some, how should I say? I want to add some functionality to this rig, because what I want to do is I want to be able to have this rig kind of like tilt up on its back leg. Because right now I've got this base over here. So first of all, if I tilt it up, there's two problems. Number one, it tilts from the from the center. Okay, so I don't want it to tilt from the center, because usually when you tilt it, it would have to tilt from the back or from someplace on the side. Okay, the other thing is actually when I tilt it, nothing tilts with it. Okay, so we're going to add some functionality to this rig. Also, and the other thing we're going to add is we're going to add a way to move the whole rig, because right now if I were to move this arm lower joint, let's say I wanted to have a move around like that, okay, it leaves the base behind. And if I click on the base and I try to move this, then it leaves the rest of the stuff behind. So let's try to do that. So let's go back into the front view, or the right view, actually. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the joint tool, okay? My root null is not checked. And I'm going to, actually, let's do the back, because this is the front, the back. Let's do the back first. I'm going to control click a little joint on the back, okay? And then I'm going to go over here and do another little bone right there, okay? And where did my bones go? Actually, they got hidden because I had my base selected, so they became children of the base. So we don't want that, so we're gonna just drag it up out of the entire hierarchy. We're gonna drag it up to the top. Okay, and we're going to call it tilt back. And then this other joint, we're going to call it tilt back tip. And once again, just like the lamp, we don't really need this joint here, but for aesthetic reasons, we're going to leave it. Okay, so now what happens is that we've got this joint here in the back. And what we're going to do is we're going to make the base a child of that tilt back joint. Okay, and now I'm going to choose the tilt back joint. And now if I were to rotate it, it rotates from the right place, obviously. Okay, so, but it's not moving anything else with it, so there's obviously a lot more work we need to do. So one thing that we need to do is we need to, let's try by just taking the arm lower and also make it a child of the tilt back joint. Okay, and now if we choose the tilt back joint and we move it, now the whole thing is moving correctly. However, oops, hold on a second. Oh boy, okay. However, the thing is that the problem is that yeah, so we've got yeah, so the other thing we want to do is we want to create a tilt forward joint. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. This is what I want to tell you. Right. When this is, actually, let's make the tilt forward joint first. Oh, let me go back. I'm sorry. So if I go over here, what happens is that there's a bone being drawn here. Okay. There's a bone that's being drawn between the tilt back joint and the arm lower joint. Okay, and I don't really need that joint to be showing there, okay? Because it's just not necessary. So this is why, the reason that I'm showing you this is why, for example, sometimes you might want to put a null in your rig. So I'm going to create a null, okay? And there it is, right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to temporarily make it a child of the arm lower rig, okay? It's a little bit kind of technical, but if you follow along, it's really not that difficult to understand. We're going to make this a child of the arm lower rig, and then we're going to do that so that way if I go to the coordinates and I just zero out all the coordinates, it pops its position and rotation to be exactly the same as that arm lower rig, because when an object is a child of something, it uses its parent's coordinates as its center of its world. So by clicking on this and making it all 0, it puts it exactly in the same point of this joint, okay? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it out from being its child, and I'm going to make the arm lower a child of that, and it gets rid of that bone, okay? It's just a question of, I don't need to see that bone. It's just necessary. So that's why, the reason that I was showing you this, hold on a minute, there's actually, this was happening before actually. It's odd. It's odd, this was happening before and I'm not really, and then it wasn't happening, but let me just, that's really weird. Let me try this again. Let me just do this again. So, okay, so let me quickly do this again because it was working fine. Maybe this had to be over here. Okay, so now, okay, so then there's that. And the undoing is messing it up. Okay.
Glenn was wondering, is it to do with the animated keyframes at all?
You mean with the auto keyframes? Auto keyframes is not on, but anyway, well, actually, so I already had it. Okay, okay. Anyway, let's keep going. Let's actually forget about. Let me just do this. If I take the tilt back, and if I rotate that, if I just bring this back to 0. Okay, now, all right. Well, I got to figure out why the undo isn't missing, but it's really working actually. So that's fine. We'll do that. So anyway, so that's what the null is. The null is in there, and it's actually getting rid of the bone. I mean, getting rid of the extra bone being drawn. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the front of the object. And we are going to go ahead and we're going to create another bone actually for the joint tool for the front tilting. Now it looks like it's rotated a little bit. Okay. It's all right, whatever. So we're going to go ahead and I think it was like 0.5 or something. Okay. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to go ahead the joint tool here. We're going to click one. Oops. Okay, so something's wrong. Okay. I have it saved actually. There we go. So see here, it works just fine. We've got our tilt back working, undo works. We've got our tilt front working, undo works. We've got a couple of nulls. So what's the difference between this one and that one? I don't know, but the point is that we've got, let me get rid of some stuff here. Okay. Let's just say that we've got our tilt back, we've got our null, another tilt front, but this is not going to be helpful for you. So you know what? I'm going to do this again because it's important that we not get.
Is there any chance it's so you've got some animated frames? I think you've got some.
Oh, I do have animated
frames.
frames. That is exactly the reason why it's happening.
Yeah, that was thanks to
that
a
is
couple
exactly
of
the reason why it's happening. Thank you so much.
No, well, no, it definitely wasn't me. It was some of the people in the chat helping us out. Thanks.
That's exactly why it's happening, because there's animated frames. Thank you, whoever suggested that.
Cheers, Glenn. Glenn got there first. A couple other people, but
cheers,
yeah.
Glenn.
Cheers, Glenn.
All right, here we go. Thank you so much. So, all right, so now let's get back to the business at hand, okay? So now we've got this, so now we can actually go ahead and make this arm lower a child of this null, okay? And now, so if we were just make it a child of the bone, we would get that errant bone. But by making it a child of the null, okay, what's happening is that you're not getting the thing. And now it works just the same way. You can choose this tilt back joint and it works, and undo is working now because there's no more keyframes on the stuff. And so now that everything's back to normal, we're going to create a little tilt front bone here, okay? And it's a little bit too big, so we'll make it smaller. And we're going to call this tilt front and tilt front tip. And so we're going to make this actually a child of the tilt back. Okay, so we're going to move it to here. And we have, once again, a bone being drawn from the tilt back joint to the tilt front joint, and we don't need that bone either. So once again, we're going to quickly create a null, okay, make it a child of the tilt front, zero out its position, so it's exactly the same place. And there it is. And we're going to now make it, put it above it, and put the tilt front in it. So that gets rid of that bone. So the whole idea is showing you this, that you can add nulls inside of your rig to help you organize things. Because if you don't have the nulls, it's going to draw bones between the joints. And then what I'm going to do is on this null, which is a parent of everything else on top, we're going to make it a child of the tilt front. Okay, so that's the hierarchy I want. So let's test it out to make sure that it works. Okay, so we've got the tilt back, which is going to tilt it up like this. Okay, we've got the tilt front. Okay, now here's the problem. The problem is that this base should be a child of the tilt front now. Okay, because you wanted it to move that way. So we've got tilt back, tilt front, okay, and then you go on and you animate the arm lower and then the rest of the model. So that's all working fine now. So, however, there's not really a good way to animate the entire rig. Let's say to move it around a surface or to do it, because I mean, I suppose you could use the tilt back rig and bone and move it around like that, but if you were to rotate it from that, it's going to rotate from that joint rather from the center. So usually when you create a rig, you create sort of like a master control rig, control object. So we're going to choose the circle. We're going to make a circle, okay? And we're going to go to the object tab, and we're going to put it on the XZ plane, okay? And we're going to bring it smaller, and we're going to put everything inside of that, okay? And we're going to name this lamp, okay? And now what's happening is that there's our rig. It's all built and ready to go. It's a forward kinematic rig, and you can animate the tilting up, back. You can also select this thing, and you could move, you know, you could move the whole thing around if you wanted to. Now we want to make this even easier to animate, okay, by introducing some inverse kinematics to it. Now we're going to make it a hybrid inverse and forward kinematic rig. And so the first question that we're going to have is, what is IK? What are inverse kinematics? So let's open up a new thing, go to the front view, choose our joint tool, turn off the root null. Okay, and we're just going to make a very simple joint chain of 2 joints. And then what we're going to do is we are going to make a little box, scale it down, and take this box and move it to about right here. Now, let's say, for example, I want to animate it. You know, this could be anything. This could be a part of a robot. It could be part of an animal, whatever. But I want to move this joint to the center of this box. Okay, so the way you do it in forward kinematics is that you would take like the first joint, for example, and you would like maybe, you know, rotate it to where you think it should be, maybe up here. Then you would take the second joint and, you know, you would rotate it, and well, that doesn't really work. So let me go back to the first joint and rotate it here. Oh, that's too high. So you have to go back to the second joint and, you know, put it there, and then eventually you'll get it. You'll get that thing, you know, exactly where you want to do, but there's a lot of trial and error involved. Okay. And in addition to the trial and error, you have more keyframes because you have to keyframe, you know, a lot of things, especially if you have more than just 2 joints. Okay, let's say you had a lot of joints. So that's great, but wouldn't it be easier, right, if, let me go back to where we were. I guess that was the starting point. Wouldn't it be easier if I could just click on this joint and just move it to there, and this joint automatically knows what to do? Okay, and that's what inverse kinematics allows you to do. It allows you to go to the end of the chain and just move it, and the rest of the chain figures itself out. Inverse kinematics is used extensively in rigging for all kinds of things. In this case, we want to make it easier to animate our lamp. It's also used for doing things like keeping feet stuck to the floor. Like if you take a bipedal creature and you move the pelvis down, you don't want the feet to go through the floor. You want the feet to stay in the floors and the knees to bend, okay? Things like that. So, and there's a lot of other reasons why you would use inverse kinematics. So how do you set this up so that way these 2 bones actually work with IK, with inverse kinematics? So the way that it's done is what you do is you click on the first joint in the chain that you want it to be inverse kinematics. So it's this one. This is going to be the start of the IK chain. And you right click it and you give it a rigging tag and you give it an IK tag. Okay. And what happens is that you want to tell it now where is the last joint in the IK chain, and you're going to put it in this end. And the last joint is the last joint of the chain right here. Okay. So we're going to take this last joint, oops, and we're going to drag it as the end joint. Okay, as soon as you do that, you've set up your IK chain. You see there's a line saying, here's the start of the chain, here's the end of the IK chain. Now there's one other thing you need, and that is you need a goal, okay? It's the joint itself is not the goal, the joint is looking for a goal. So the thing is that you could do it one of two ways. The first way is you can create an object, let's say a null, okay? Here we just created a null here, we'll put it right here. And in the IK tag, we're gonna say, we're gonna just drag that into the goal field, okay? And it snaps to that goal. And now if I move that null around, you can see that it's behaving as an IK joint system, okay? So for example, I can now click on that null and I can just put it exactly where I want it to be. It's just not a problem, okay? And so this is great. You can actually even, for example, if you were, let me just move this IK chain off, because for example, if you had another, well, actually, you can actually have it with 3 joints. Okay, so for example, let me try to make a third joint here. Okay, and now as far as the ending joint, instead of joint 2, we'll put the ending joint to be joint 3. Okay, and now the IK chain is actually, with more than 2 joints. So it's up to you. You can have, this is great for like a spider leg or some sort of like a robot contraption on Mars, like a robot hand. Would you imagine how hard this would be to animate without IK? It'd be very difficult. So let's go back to just a 2-joint chain. And what we could do though, is we could have some of the joint chain to be forward kinematic. So for example, right now the chain goes from joint to joint 2. But what we could do is we could add, like, for example, another couple of joints there. And now it's both forward kinematic and inverse kinematic rig that, you can sort of move some of it with IK, and then these 2 joints, you would then go ahead and animate with FK, like that. So, depending on what you're doing, you don't have to go all IK, you can go IK and FK. So, by the way, we created this little null here, but in the IK tag, let me get rid of these 2 joints too. So now there's no goal anymore. You can't really animate it. So in the IK tag, instead of creating your own null, you could actually say add goal. So if you click add goal, it says joint to goal, and it's just a null, just like as if you created yourself. And it's working the same way. Now there's one other thing that we're going to talk about when creating IK chains for now, because actually it actually does more, but we're not going to get into this right now. But I'm going to go to like a perspective way. Here's my goal, and there's my chain. Is that sometimes, if let's say this was an arm, and this was the elbow, sometimes you want to be able to point the elbow out. For example, sometimes when you bend your arm, your elbow is in a certain place, but if you can move your elbow and have it pointing back, let's say, or whatever. And that's what's called the pole vector of an IK joint rig. Okay, and the way that you set up the pole vector is that I'm going to go to my IK chain, and there's something here called a pole vector. And I'm going to click add pole. Now I've added, and it gave me something called a joint pole. Okay, and it too is actually how should I say? It's a null. But you don't have to have it look like a little dot. You can make this null, you can make any null look different. We're going to make it look like a little triangle. So it makes it a little easier to see where that thing is. And on the goal, we're going to make that a little square. Where is it? Square, rectangle, okay? And we can make that a little bit bigger if we want, okay? So now with the pole vector, Okay, I can go ahead and select this joint, this pole vector, and I can point where sort of the elbow of this thing is. Okay, so on character rigs, you often have these pole vectors. It lets you point the knees in different direction, and it lets you point your elbows in different directions, and so on and so forth. So that's what the pole vector, we've got our joint pole vector, we've got our joint goal right here, and so on and so forth. Now, so one thing that would be kind of, interesting to do with IK, inverse kinematics, is I'm going to make a cylinder, for example. Okay, I'm going to make it wider and thinner, let's say. Okay, give it a little bit more things, okay? And then I'm going to open up my asset manager, look for like a wood material, and under materials here. And I'm just going to drag a material onto it like this. And we're going to take the cylinder and we're going to give it a negative Z thing over here, and sort of move this, maybe make it a little bit smaller. Okay, and I'm going to make a little, let's say a little square, make the cube, a cube, we'll make it a child of that, zero out its position, give it some kind of a yellowish color. Something like that, and drag that onto the cube, okay, and make that cube a lot smaller, like that, and bring it out in front a little bit, move it to the left, make another null that's a child of that, okay, here. Bring that null to the front of it, okay? And then what I'm going to do is take that null, or better yet, actually, I'll just make the rectangle, the joint tool goal, a child of that cube. That's really what I should do, and zero that along its axis. Like that, and then what we're going to do is we can now go ahead and let's up the amount of frames in our animation. Let's hide this asset and this thing. And what we're going to do is we're going to set a keyframe on the cylinder. Over here, go to the last frame, and we want to rotate this around. So we don't want to rotate it this way. We don't want to rotate it that way. We want to rotate it this way. So we're going to type in like 3 times 360. That's going to make it go around 3 times, okay? And we're going to set a key for it there, okay? And then what happens is that we can create this kind of animation, which is kind of like you could think of it as somebody spinning salad, or you can maybe make it part of a locomotive wheel or something like that. But these types of things are also really useful for IK. Now, obviously, it's intersecting, so this is where you want the pole vector to kind of come in, and you can move the pole vector to the side a little bit, and you can have this thing animate in this way. So that's one example. Another example of why IK is a crucial skill and process to understand in animation. So, any questions yet, or are we good?
You read my mind. I just unmuted myself to interrupt you.
Okay.
So we've got a couple of questions that have come in, especially on this topic. But just before, Wesley was wondering, can vertices be weighted to nulls if you chose to skin the lamp? So this was on the previous project.
There is something called a cluster object that's kind of like, generally no. You want to weight vertices to bones.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean, you can use nulls to control bones, but the weighting happens with the bones. I mean, you could, you know, I wouldn't see really why you would want to weight to a null, because kind of a bone is kind of like a null. They don't render, and they're made for you to weight vertices to. So in some ways, you know what, I think you could actually, come to think of it, because when you start weighting, the points are weighted to its, by default weighted to the object. So you know what, we can try tomorrow when we talk about point weighting. But generally you wouldn't really want to, but we can try it tomorrow.
Cool, sounds good. Another one here. So you know when you set
not
up
tomorrow,
your
next Wednesday, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, next Wednesday.
Yeah.
Everyone's panicking now.
Right.
So you know how you set up your IK on the kind of like the top joint? Glenn was wondering, can the second joint set also be IK?
Yeah, actually they could. I mean, I don't see why not, although let's just, I don't see why you would want to do it, although I'm sure there'd be a reason to do it. I'm sure you could find a reason to do it. So you're saying like build like an IK between these two joints, right? Like rigging tags, IK. Put the end over here, add a goal. So then you've got this second goal, right? And then you're saying that like make a another one here, and then on this one add an IK tag.
I think so,
right?
yeah.
And then
yeah,
on this one basically add another joint. Yeah, you can. You can. Now, I mean, this would be kind of interesting. I'm sure you could do some really cool motion with it. Although, so what you can do is you would, so here, joint 4 goal. So you've got this joint 2 goal and joint 4 goal. We're actually going to talk about where to put these goals later. But so you can actually go ahead and animate this one. Yeah, well, there already you can see kind of a cool use for it. You know,
that's cool.
Because it's this joint, this goal is sticking the last joint to it. So this could actually kind of be used for like a, I'm thinking shake that booty type of thing, but I could be wrong, you know, but there's that. But anyway, but the thing is that can be, yeah, I mean, this could be really useful, come to think of it. I'm not sure if I've ever, but so then there's that one, and then this one would then just do that one. So yeah, that's a great question, and that could be very, very useful. I could already think of some reasons to use that. So yes.
Yeah, I was going to say that was a great question as well. But thanks for showing it as well. Thanks for
sure,
like demoing that. We've got there's a couple more if we have the time. This one's sort of a two-parter. So the first part is, do we rig an arm if it's straight, or can we rig it when it's bent? And then the second part of the question is, if we rig a straight arm and it bends in the wrong direction, how do we make it bend in the right direction? And that's from Sharon.
Right. So we're gonna talk about some of those things when we talk about character rigs, but the quick answer is that you can rig an arm or anything in any position you want to. It doesn't have to be straight. It could be bent. It could be anything. There's actually a big, there's not, I wouldn't say it's big, but there's actually some discussion about how to rig a default character. Usually in the classic sense, you rig it in a T pose, right? But where your arms are kind of like out to the side in like this T pose. But really, we very seldom walk around with like a T pose, although you would think it kind of makes sense because the T pose is kind of like halfway between all the way down and all the way up. So if you can get it right, which just actually brings up a really good question to talk about if we're going to talk about on the which actually was going to talk about next Wednesday, but is edge flow. Okay, so when you're designing a model, you want to have proper edge flow, especially if you're going to be doing point weighting. And the edge flow is the way the polygons are arranged so that the edges are kind of like conducive to be animated. Like, for example, if you get like a scan or something with like a zillion polygons, right, and they're all chopped up in ways, it might look good on the screen, but it's not going to animate well, okay, because there doesn't have proper edge flow or proper topology. That's why when you do a sculpt, you have to re-topologize it if you're planning to animate it. If you just want to do a render of it, you could just leave it, you know, with the high resolution sculpt. But once you're saying that I want to make this a character, I have to animate it, then you have to re-topologize it. So the question, so the thing is that, but the question is that which way should you really rig your character? Let's say the arms, right? Is that classic way is a T-pose. I actually use that most of the time myself, but there's a lot of people do it in an A pose, okay, which the arms at like a 45-degree angle down, okay? But the other thing is that if you want to bend the arm, if you model the arm, let's say your character is mostly going to have bent arms, and they're never, then bend the arms and rig it that way. Follow me?
Yeah, that's a great answer. Cheers, Joe. Yeah. So we have one quick final question, and then I'll be quiet.
Okay.
So Aaron was wondering if the bones are driven by the rotation of the wheel, so it's related to the thing that we can see right now, but have geometry attached, how do you prevent intersections? So yeah, sorry, it wasn't this one. It was the
hold on.
the one with the wheel that you have.
So actually, hold on. The question is what exactly?
So if the bones are driven by the rotation of the wheel, but they have geometry attached, how do you prevent intersections?
Well, I mean, it depends what it is. You know, I mean, that would really, you know, the thing is that with rigging is that, you know, this is a real crude example. As a matter of fact, there's no geometry here, as you can see here. But like right now, actually, this joint goal is a child of the cube, actually, and it's intersecting it, actually, because why? Because it's attached to the cube at its center point, you know, at its pivot point. But I can take that goal, you know, and I can stick it out to here, let's say, you know, and now it's not intersecting, you know, that thing at all. It doesn't intersect it anymore. You can see that. So, I mean, it depends. Like, for example, if it's fingers, you know, really the thing is that, and we're going to talk about some of this later when we get to constraints. But really what I could do is that if this was really turning around, you see right now that cube is actually rotating. So right now it's like at a 45-degree angle. Really, if this was like maybe kind of like a locomotive wheel, you know, this would always be facing with the top facing up. So that's when you would use what are called constraints. Okay, so in the rigging tag, we would use constraints. We're not quite ready to talk about constraints, but we are actually going to talk about them in a few minutes. We're going to start our discussion of constraints because rigging without constraints, there are several things in rigging that you absolutely must have. Okay, one of them is IK, you know. The other one are constraints. So we're actually going to talk about constraints, but you would do it with constraints.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Cheers, Joe.
Okay. So let's go back to our lamp right now. And now what we want to do, now that we've learned all about IK and how useful it is for so many different things, we want to set up IK on this to make it easier for the animators to animate. Because what I want to just do, just so you know, is I just want to pick up the lamp head and move it around. okay? And I want everything to follow along with it perfectly, okay? So I just have one control to animate the lamp. So, so we're gonna find, so basically we're gonna find where we want the IK chain to start, which is going to be on the lower arm. We're gonna want it to start there. So we're gonna right click there. We're gonna give it to the rigging tags. We're gonna give it an IK joint. I mean an IK tag, okay? And in the IK tag, we're gonna tell where we want it to end. We want it to end at the lamp, not at the lamp tip, but at the lamp, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna say that's where we want it to end. So it draws a line showing where the IK starts and where it ends. And then what we're gonna do is we wanna give it a goal. So let's click on this. We're gonna say add goal, and it gives it a goal, which is right here. Okay, there's our goal, it just added that. Now, the thing is that if I were to click off of it, you can't really see where the goal is, so how are you going to select it, right? So that's why we're going to click on the goal, and we are going to go into the Object tab, and instead of making it a dot, we're going to make it a cube, and we're going to up it to about that big. Okay, so now this is just an indication of what the goal is. It's not a piece of geometry. It's just a controller. It's like a controller. Okay, so there it is. So now if I take this thing, and if I were to drag it around, you can see that it could be like digging, let's say, or you can stand straight up at attention, or he could go back and recoil in horror. Okay, but it's all really just easily controlled by this IK controller. So now the thing is that what I'm going to do is click on the IK tag, and I'm going to also add a pole vector, okay? And it also added this pole right here. I'm going to drag this a little bit out so that way it's not exactly there because you can't see it. And I'm going to tell it that I want it to be a triangle, okay? So now with the pole vector, I can control which way the lamp is headed, okay? And then obviously we still have the tilts in the back. Now, here's the big question that you might have, okay? Because right now, these controllers are children of the tilt front. Okay, so that way, oh, wait, which one is this? Oh, I thought I had made a thing for the bottom. Didn't I make? Oh, there it is. I'm on the wrong one. Okay. Okay, I'm on the wrong one. So let's quickly just do that again. Okay, so we go to the lower, we're going to say rigging tags, we're going to go IK, we're going to go to the lamp, we're going to give it, that's the end, we're going to add a goal there, we're going to click on the goal, we're going to give it a cube, we're going to scale the cube up as a controller, we're going to click on the IK tag, we're going to add a pole vector, we're going to click on the pole, move it up, move it forward a little bit, tell it that we want it to be a triangle. That's exactly what it is. So right now, for example, if I want to take the tilt back control and tilt this back, the whole thing goes with it, okay? That might be what you want, depending on what your model is and what you're trying to accomplish. However, what if you wanted to sort of tilt back, but you don't want the head to move? So there you've got to change it, you got to change where the hierarchy of the controller. So we're going to take the controller and we're going to drag it up, okay, outside of the hierarchy. So now if I take the tilt back, this stays where it is, but you can control the tilting of the base. You can control the tilting of the base outside of the hierarchy. So that's good. Actually, I think I might prefer it that way, although like I told you before, you might prefer it the other way. However, there's one thing with this way. Okay, so right now, if I were to move the base, okay, you know, that stays where it is. Now, this might be useful, for example, if you have like a robot and it was like you needed this kind of motion on the base. But I think personally, I would like to have these two controllers as children of the lamp base. Okay, so this way, if I were to move the whole lamp, everything moves. But if I were to tilt things or do whatever else I wanted to do, it doesn't control this part. You know, because when you tap your feet, your head doesn't move. Think of it that way. Okay, so now we have this nice IK rig. Okay, IK rig, except just keep in mind that the tilting is being done with FK. Okay, so it has some FK and some IK. So now the thing is that there's one other thing that I want to do actually, is that right now, if I were to take this this controller here and I were to move it around, it moves like that. But if I ever wanted to control the lamp itself, I've got to move this to the position that I want to move. Okay, then I have to click on the lamp, and then I have to rotate the lamp separately. Okay, like that. So it's kind of a two-step approach. What happens is that a lot of people, what they like to do in this case, and this is very commonly done on IK hands. Okay, so what you want to do is you have the IK goal for the wrist, but they want to be able to rotate that IK goal and have the whole hand rotate. So right now, if I were to go ahead and if I were to rotate this goal, nothing happens to the lamp. Okay, it's only affecting it as far as where its position is concerned. But let's say I wanted to affect it. I wanted to affect the rotation of the lamp as well as the hand. I mean, as well as we want to affect the rotation of the lamp as well as the position of the lamp. Okay. So now we're going to learn our next really important thing when it comes to rigging, and that is the use of constraints. Okay. So constraints is something that you may or you may not have come across before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the lamp. I'm going to right click it, and under rigging tags, I'm going to choose a constraint tag. Okay, so we click that, and what happens is that you get a little tag here. It looks like this, kind of looks like a push pin right now. Okay, and that means that, and then that's a constraint tag. And what we're going to do is we are going to tell this lamp, we're going to constrain its rotation to the goal. So here's how we do it. First of all, you click on the constraint tab. There's a lot of different kinds of constraints, and most of them are very, very useful. Okay, and you can have more than one constraint on an object. But for the sake of this discussion, we're going to use a very popular constraint. It's called the transform constraint. As soon as I click it, you notice you get a little tab here that says transform. Okay, so here it is without it, and here it is with it. Oops, I clicked the wrong constraint. Okay, so let's go into that transform constraint. So I want to constrain this lamp to the lamp goal, its rotation. You could, because actually it's already constrained to its position, because this lamp joint is at the same position as the controller. So the lamp joint and the cross. So I don't need the position constraint, but I do need the rotation constraint. So now it's asking me, what's my target? Okay, and so our target is going to be the lamp goal. So we're going to put that in there. So now what happens is that if we do that and we click on the lamp constraint, okay, now wherever I rotate this controller, the lamp is going to follow along with it. Okay, so there's only one control I need. to control both the lamp position and the lamp rotation. Okay, so now there's that. Now, so that's all well and good. Actually, our rig is for this is kind of finished right now. There's nothing else I could really think that I would want to do. We've got our pole vector in there. However, the question becomes is that when you're working on a project, you know, if you're making a short film by yourself or whatever, you might be the modeler and the texture artist and the lighter and the animator and the rigger. You might do all those things for your project. But if you're working on a large team, on a large project, you might just be the rigger, and then you will have to hand off your rigged characters or rigged objects to the animators, okay? And now, so in order to do that, you kind of want to make things easier for the animators to deal with. There's like a lot going on that they that in this rig. So number one is that you want to kind of simplify things for them. Number two is that right now you've got problems with this rig. For example, if I wanted to click on this back tilter thing and I want to be able to tilt this rig, if I click on it, look what's being selected. The joint's not being selected. The base is. I can't really get to that bone, or here too. Maybe if I go on the very edge, even so, very hard to select. So these are the kind of things that you want to fix for the animator, okay? So the way that you can do, one of the things that's important in rigging, okay, is to be able to use layers, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 3 layers. 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to call my top layer, I'm going to call it the geo layer. And on the geo layer, I'm going to put all my geometry. Second layer I'm going to create is called the bones layer. And on the bones layer, actually, if you want to really be correct, I'll call it joints and bones. And nulls, if you really want to, you know, and nulls. Okay? But you can probably just put joints and figure it out yourself. And then my third layer, I'm going to put controllers. Okay, so right now I'm going to organize this rig into different ways. So first, let's start at the top. For this thing on the bottom, this is a controller. So we're going to add it to the controllers layer. The pole, the IK pole is a controller. So we're going to put it on a controllers layer. The lamp goal is a, this thing is a controller. So we're going to put it on the controllers. This is a bone. The tilt back is a bone. So we're going to put it on our bone layer. The null I'm going to put on my bone layer, or joints, bones, and nulls layer. This I'm going to put on my joints, bones, and nulls layer. This is geometry, so I'm going to add this to my geometry layer. Null goes on the bone layer. This goes on to the joints layer. This goes on to the geometry layer. This goes on to the geometry layer. The arm upper bone goes onto the bones layer. The arm itself goes onto the geo layer. The bone, this bone goes onto that, to the bone layer. Lamp goes onto the geo layer. Lamp tip goes onto the bones layer. This is a bone, so it goes on, a joint, so it goes onto this layer. And this is a joint, so it goes onto this layer. Okay, so now I've got everything onto different layers. So for example, I can hide the geo layer. You just get the rig. Okay, I can hide the bones and you get that, and you can hide the controllers like that. So now the thing is that you can do certain things. For example, you can lock the geometry layer, okay? Now, if I lock the geometry layer, if I were to click on a bone, let's say this bone, it's gonna click on the joint, okay? So keep that in mind, that if you having trouble, before when you clicked on the joint, you were clicking on the, without this locked, you know, if I click there, I'm clicking on, I select the base. But when it's locked, I select the joint. There we go. So I'm selecting the joint. Okay. So that's already useful. The other thing you can do is you can hide the geo from the object manager, which you may or may not want to do. Okay, because right now they're all grayed out, right? So because they're locked. Okay, but if I want, I can hide it from here, so the animator never has to even see the geometry. In here, you can keep it really nice and clean. Okay. Now, let's talk about the joints and bones layer. Okay. So what we can do is we can actually hide this layer. Now, wouldn't that be nice? Look how clean it looks. Okay. It's like the animator knows exactly what to do. He knows that you can control this by this thing, okay, and its rotation, okay, and you can control it by this thing as well, okay. So the thing is that you don't have to have any. I mean, it's just nice and clean. So you don't need to see the bones. However, when I hid the bones, I hid something else, okay, and that is I hid the tilter bones, okay. So that presents a dilemma, okay, because you really need to see those bones if you want to tilt the base forward and backward. So basically the thing is that what do you do in this case? And what you do is you create controllers. Now, advanced rigs, or rigging, when they have tons of controllers, because right now, if you want to rotate a bone, you have to find it here. So, you could either find it here, but what if you have tens of, hundreds of bones? It's not going to be easy to find it. And if you hide the bones, you're not going to be able to find it at all. So the thing is that what we're going to do is we're going to create controllers, okay? You'll see that rigs have all kinds of controllers in there. So let's make a controller. So the way that we're going to make a controller for this back thing is I'm going to choose the spline tool, okay? And I'm going to create a shape here. Now, usually the controller is shaped in some way that's indicative of its movement, okay? I'm not going to do anything fancy here. I just don't want to spend the time to do something fancy. I'm just going to do something to grab onto, which is going to look something like this, okay? Doesn't really indicate its movement, but it is what it is, okay? So when I created that, you'll see that what happened was that if I go back to, right now I'm in point mode, if I go back to model mode, you'll see that its null is in the center of the world. Even though the points are over here, the null is in the center of the world, okay? I'm gonna take that null just really quickly. I'm gonna put it on the tilt, under the tilt back bone, okay? I'm going to zero out its coordinates. Okay, which brings it over here, and it shifted the points over here, but it's exactly over that bone. Okay, I'm going to go to the point mode and select the points of that controller, move it back. So now we've got like this, and I'm going to call it tilt back con plus. Now, I sometimes use naming conventions, sometimes I don't, but usually, but a lot of people, they call their controllers con plus. And they have other names too. So if you want, you could add that too. Then you'll know that that is a controller, okay? Or you could have your own naming convention. So you have this thing here. Its pivot is right there. Its origin is right there. And what I want to do is I don't want to make it a child of the tilt back, okay, because that's going to cause problems if you make it a child of the thing you're trying to control. So I'm going to put it on top of it, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click it and I'm going to give it another constraint tag. And I'm also going to give it a constraint tag, transform constraint, just like we did the other constraint for the lamp, to click off position and drag the tilt back for the thing that is going to be its target. And I did this wrong, actually. Sorry about that. We want to give the constraint to the bone. Okay, we want to constrain the bone to the controller, not the controller to the bone. So we want to go ahead and rigging tags, constraint, transform constraint, take off the position, drag the target in. Okay, something happened. No back control, constraint. Looks good. Oh, because it's a tilt front we need to do. Okay, it's a tilt back. Tilt back. Where's Greg when you need him? Or as you can see that this works fine in this other one, in the finished one. But let me just see here, tilt back. Let's try this again, okay. Here's the tilt back joint. It's not constrained, okay. And then here's the controller, okay. And we want to tell this joint, we're going to give it a rigging tag. We want to give it a constraint. And give it a transform constraint. We want to constrain its rotation to this. Oh, okay, I know what's happening. Okay, so actually, if you look, this tilt back thing actually has a strange rotation on it. Okay, so what we forgot to do was when we zeroed out its position, we didn't zero out its rotation. So we want the rotation of this thing to match that bone, okay? And now we want to drag it back on top, but you'll notice that it flipped these points around. So we're going to go back into point mode. We're going to select these points, okay? We're going to open up the coordinate manager. This is position, rotation, and size, not scale, but size. And we want to just put a negative over here, and that's going to flip those joints, those points. Okay, now this will work if we just go ahead, okay, with the constraint, and we drag that in there. Okay, now we're going to go to the object menu, and now we can use this controller to rotate that joint, even if this controller happens to be out here somewhere in outer space. It doesn't really need to be right next to the joint. It could be over here if you want, okay? And then what you can do is you can go ahead, and this is now, we've made our first controller, okay? And what we can do now is we can add this to the controller's thing, okay? So, and then quickly what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this thing, I'm going to drag off a copy of it, make it a child of the tilt front, zero everything, and this time don't forget to zero the rotation too, okay? And make it not a child of itself, okay? Give this a rigging tag, constraint, drag this, make it a transform. We don't need position. drag this for a rotation constraint. Okay, and now this control is going to rotate the front. Now, and then let's, okay, so now these two are on the controller state. Let's go back to our layers menu. Now, we can hide the bones. Okay, and this is what we can hand off to the animator. Okay, nice and clean. They don't need to see some crazy bones. And we can also hide the bones from the, what do you call this? The object manager. Okay, so this is the only thing that we're going to give to the animator. They don't need to see all the mess of bones, because especially if you have hundreds of bones, they don't need to see it here. They don't need to see it here. They just need to see the controls that you're going to use, okay, which in this case is the pole, this and that. So I think we have a little bit of time left to try to animate with this, okay? So I'm going to try to animate with this. I'm going to create, like, for example, a little box like that, and put this over here. And maybe we'll make it a little bit bigger, okay? And then we're going to hide this work plane, okay? Maybe we'll make it a little wider, and we'll add a plane to the bottom, okay, over to here, and we will drag it out this way, or maybe this is enough, and this way, and I'm going to make a little sphere. And I'm going to make the sphere have a little bit more segments, and we're going to make it smaller. And we're going to go to the side of it here like that. Oops, wrong side. And it's going to be a ball, because this is a playful little lamp. And what we want to have it do is we want to have it kick the ball with dynamics. So let's just make some really quick colors here. We'll make kind of like a bluish color for the ball. And we'll make like a greenish color for the plane. And we'll make a sort of, I don't know, brownish or beigeish color for the cube. Okay, so what we want to do here is we want to, oops, we forgot the ball. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to right click on the sphere, and we are going to give it a simulation tag, a rigid body simulation. Okay, if I were to press play right now, let me up the size of the scene. If I were to press right now, it's just going to fall through the floor, and that's because we need to give the cube a collider body, and the plane, we're going to give it a collider body. Okay, and there's one other thing that we need to give a collider body to, and that is the lamp. Okay, but the thing is that it's all hidden right now, so I have to go back to the layers thing. I have to unhide the geo from the and unlock the geo from the thing. Actually, I don't have to unhide it, because I could just, no, actually I do. So I will go ahead and I click on the lamp and give this a collider body, okay? And now what we can do is we can, for example, keyframe. Oh, here's one other really important thing about rigging that I needed to mention, okay? And that is, right now, this lamp is in its default position, okay? So let's say, for example, you move this lamp over to here and you rotated it, and you know, moved it, maybe moved it, you know, on this axis over to here, whatever, and you want to get it back to its default position. Well, that's kind of hard to do because you don't really know where it came. You could kind of maybe try to guess where it is. You can move it back to, you know, find out where it was. Let's say you can't, you know, so, but the thing is that that's going to be a problem. So I'm going to undo all that, and I'm going to click on this thing right here, and in the coordinates tab for this lamp goal, under freeze transformation, you see here's actually its transforms. Okay, here's where it actually exists and how much it's rotated. So unless you remember all that, you won't be able to get it back to its original position easily. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to freeze the transformations by clicking freeze all, and it stores those values down here, and it makes all these values 0. So now what happens is wherever I want to move this, whatever I want to do with it, okay, however I want to make it do its thing, like that, if I just go back to the lamp goal and type in 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and everything, it'll bring it back to its original position. Another way to do that, okay, is to go into the tools menu and choose reset transform, and it resets everything back to 0. So that's really useful, especially when you're dealing with complicated rigs or facial rigs, and the eyebrows get all messed up and you got this weird expression on the face, and it's like, oh no, how do I get it back to its rest position? So what you want to do is you want to freeze the transformation of all the joints and bones and everything, and then this way you could just reset it and slock, it just goes back into its rest position. All right, so now that this is ready for animation, we're just going to take this thing, we're going to keyframe its thing. We'll go like whatever, 20 frames later. We'll maybe move it up, like if it's kind of taken aback at what it sees, you know, and we'll move it like that it's looking at it, and we'll keyframe that, okay? And maybe we'll hold that keyframe a little bit, okay? So we'll move forward a little bit. And then we'll go another 20 frames, let's say. I'm not really concerned about the timing here. That's up to you and the art of animation. If you actually end up animating this in a cool way, let us know, you know, let me know. I'd like to see what you do with this rig, if you can maybe do some cool stuff with it. But anyway, I'm going to bring it down to here, okay? And I'm going to rotate it, you know, like kind of like that. It's about to do that. I'll keyframe that, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to now move forward a little bit to about right here. And I'm going to rotate this a little bit up like that. Oh no, did I move this or not? I didn't move it. So it goes down to here. Then I got to move forward a little bit. And then take this, move that to here, rotate it up. Okay, keyframe that. Okay, so what's going to happen is let's play this back and see what happens. So it looks up and it pushes it along down its little thing. It's too long, the animation. Let's make it 150 frames, whatever. So, and there it goes. So, you know, you can have it, and then maybe at the end of the motion, after it does its thing, it can come back up. Maybe it can come back up and watch it as it rolls away. Keyframe that. So we've got this type of thing happening. A little bit too fast of a recoil at the end, so I'll stretch that out. Still too fast. Is that the end here? Yeah, well, actually, that's fine. So we've covered a lot of rigging techniques in this lesson. Just to recap, we've talked about parent-based weighting, mechanical weighting, forward kinematics, inverse kinematics, organizing your rig onto different layers, so that way making things easier for the animator and hiding controls. It's about 2 hours, isn't it? I wanted to at least see if anybody had any questions or anything. And if anybody has any questions or anything, you know, I'll be happy to entertain them to the best I can.
So I'm just taking a quick look through a lot of lovely comments of support saying people absolutely loving this, they're going to be catching it up. There was a quick question actually that was relating to the whole workshop. Sharon was wondering, at any point will we be rigging animals like dogs or cats in the future? She says that a lot of people talk about rigging people because that's a very common thing. But what about animals? Or do you have any?
That's a good question. I might put that in there just so you know. So this is sort of like a level 1 rigging course. But we are going to talk about some advanced concepts in it, you know, like different techniques for rigging and stuff. And we are going to rig a character. Now, to create a full-on character rig, you can go ahead and do it with the skills you're going to learn from this course. The point weighting, all the stuff we did today, the IK. We're going to rig actually a simple character from scratch. But when we're going to get into full-on character rigging, okay, we're going to take advantage of something in Cinema 4D called the character object, okay? And a character object is, I'm going to be completely, direct with you, is that building a full-on character rig is a total worthwhile thing to do, especially if you want to learn how to rig. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to do a full character rig. So what the character object lets you do is that it lets you create a rig more simply, okay? And basically basically it comes with a biped rig, and it also comes with some quadruped rigs, okay? And it also comes with a bird rig. So we are going to rig a bird actually as part of this. And we're going to also learn about fan bones, which actually come in really handy when you want to like rig wings and things like that. And I would certainly suggest that you build your own rig from scratch, no matter what the character is, even if it's a very complicated character. But it can be overwhelming. And so I would suggest you use the character object. I do. I mean, I know how to rig, and I often use the character object. And you're going to see why it's so much usable. Now, generally, we're going to go into the biped rig because we're going to rig a biped. But the thing is that we might want to look. I'll definitely look into the quadruped rigs as well. You know, maybe I'll do a quick little demo of it. We're probably not going to rig an entire quadruped, but we can look at the rig and see how it works. Does that answer the question?
It does, yeah. And it even answered a second question where someone was actually asking, Angelo was asking about the character object. So you're reading everyone's minds. Right.
I mean, listen, here's the thing. The thing is that you should learn how to rig whether or not you use the character object. You should learn about rigging and the things we're talking about here. What is IK? What are hierarchies? What is freeze transformations? All that stuff. You should learn that stuff because a lot of times you just want to do some little rigging. You know, you're not rigging a full quadruped. You might want to rig an oak tree. you know, and have it bend a certain way and have it just for bring it to life. Or you want to maybe rig some letters and have some letters walk out onto the screen. You don't need a full biped rig for that. So you want to, you know, you would want to know about how to rig, or in this case, this lamp, or it could be a locomotive or some wheels or some gears. Okay, so you know, you want to know about rigging and how to rig stuff. But when it comes to a full quadruped rig, I'd suggest going with the character object, unless you really want to become a rigging master, which is great, you know, or you want to get a job at Disney as a rigger, then build your own rig from scratch. But as we're going to see, we'll be able to actually take a look at the character object rig, and you can actually study that rig. Yeah.
Cool, that's great. That's perfect. So let me just steal the screen back quickly.
Okay.
So yeah, lots of lovely comments in there. Jim
Wonderful.
was saying it's
Thank you.
let me find what he said, best webinar of the year. So
Oh, thank you so much. I really
yeah,
appreciate that.
lots of really lovely comments from everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And thanks everyone for your questions as well. Thanks, Joe, first of all, thank you. This has been an amazing 2 hours. I find these go so quickly as well, because it's just great stuff that we're showing.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone
yeah.
for coming. And I guess I'll stick around while you steal the screen, but.
Yeah, so I've just stolen the screen. So I'm hoping people can see my screen. It's being a little bit strange at the moment. Okay, cool. It has decided to freeze on me, which is annoying. Okay, right. Maybe I will just have to talk about it because it doesn't seem to want to show my screen. And I can't do anything on GoToWebinar now. I'm hoping that everyone can still see me and everything, which is...
I can hear you and I can see you.
Cool. Well, yes, we will have to maybe bypass the fact that I can't show my screen, but hey, these things happen sometimes. I was just going to let everyone know that, again, this session has been recorded and we're going to upload it onto the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel. It may not be today, it may be tomorrow morning, but we'll see. And also thanks to Dr. Sassy, as he tends to watch these sessions and he does all the timestamps for us. And it's a real lifesaver. So thank you so much to Dr. Sassy. And I was going to talk about and show sort of what we're going to be doing next week. So I was wondering if, Joe, you had a couple of minutes to just sort of let us know what's happening next week. I know we had a slide for it, but my GoToWebinar, do you know what?
Yeah.
It's 7 p.m. here, and clearly GoToWebinar stops working.
Well,
at 7 p.m.
The big thing, let me actually look at the, the big thing about next week is we're going to talk about, first of all, how to, weight points onto joints. And there's a lot to it. So we're going to be looking at how to use the weight manager. We're going to be learning how to, the right way to handle weights around joints, because it can be kind of hard actually to weight. Some things are easier than others, like shoulders are notoriously hard. And you still spend most of your time figuring out how you're going to get a good shoulder joint. But we're going to learn about point weighting. We're going to rig some simple setups, okay, like a bird. And I've actually have to check my notes whether or not, actually I don't have my notes in front of me right now, but the big thing to really think about, and it's a big subject, is about how to properly point weight. We're going to talk about how to use the weight tool. We're going to talk about how to weight with symmetry, how to copy weights from one side of the mesh to another side of the mesh, assign bones, and that's the big thing. And there's going to be several examples. So one of the examples is going to be we're going to be rigging, I think we're going to start rigging a claw, and we're going to go into rigging a bird and things like that. So point weighting is the big thing.
Cool, that sounds great. Yeah, I'm really excited, and I'm sure everyone else is. From the look of the comments, yeah, everyone is looking forward to that. And yeah, once again, thanks everyone for, whoever's watching this live, whoever's catching this up on YouTube. We really appreciate it. And again, thank you so much, Joe, for, this amazing workshop. I know we're already 1 week in and it's already incredible stuff. So I can't wait for the next week.
Thank you so much. Thanks for
Cool. So have a lovely rest of your day, and everyone else have an amazing rest of your days and weeks, and we will catch you on the next session. Have a good one, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.